So for my presentation, I kind of wanted to focus more on the basics of infancy and the stages. So what we should be looking for, what should be going on kind of at this time. Um, for the first thing I wanted to talk about was learning and habituation. This is kind of when the child is picking up on things that are familiar. For instance, when you're reading them a bedtime story or singing them lullabies, this is when the kid kind of picks up on those things. Like, oh, that sounds familiar. I know that sound. I'm aware of what that is because I've heard it. And it's comforting to them because they've heard it. Whether you're reading them a story or singing them lullabies or rocking them to sleep, it can be just something super small that we do every day. And it's something that the kid can pick up on and realize, oh, like that sounds familiar to me, even as a baby. And I thought that was so unique because they're so young, but they're still able to realize when something sounds familiar to them. Another thing that I kind of wanted to go into was physical and motor development. To me, this is kind of when our kids dealing with milestones. So when they can roll over for the first time, when they're walking, running, picking up small objects, cutting with scissors, managing a pencil, or drawing human-like figures. Of course, some of these we will do a little bit later on and not as we're an infant, but one I wanted to dial in on a little bit was rolling over. So when the baby is learning how to start on their stomach and roll on their back, or vice versa, that is when they are kind of taking their first time of using their physical and motor skills. And that is something that we want to push. We want our babies to start using those. And that's just a small example of when they can start to use that, from rolling over to standing up on their own or crawling, just little things, and they do progress as they get older. I wanted to point out some states of arousal because these can be something that are very important as our kids are babies. For walking activity. Now, this is something that takes up our entire body, but it's also something that can cause a shift in our eye movement or how we breathe. When we're walking, our eyes are a little bit more actively moving because we're moving. We're breathing a little bit different because we're doing something. We're not just sitting or not being held or things like that. So it is a state of arousal for the baby. Crying. Now, this is one we probably don't want to see much of our kids doing, but it is a state of arousal that we don't typically think of, because when they're crying, to me, it's kind of like they're picking up on something's not right, or they're crying because they want something, and that's the only way they know how to kind of communicate that they're unhappy or that they want something. And crying can take many different forms. It can be a whine, it could be a hurt cry. They're crying in pain, they're crying because they want something and they don't know how to say it. So just a lot of different kinds of crying, and that can also be a state of arousal. For another one, we have alert inactivity. To me, this is super important because this is when our kids are kind of learning how to be alert by different things going on. For instance, when the light changes, when it goes from light to dark or dark to light, the kids' eyes adjust to that, or they're like, whoa, what's going on? Or when their eyes are following a moving object. This is kind of when their eyes are moving along with something. That's how their eyes are becoming alert. They're becoming alert. They're noticing what's going on around them. Or they kind of notice, oh, nothing's going on, so they have a little bit more of a relaxed face because they realize not much is going on. So it's being alert for what's going on around them. Another one is drowsiness. Probably, I'm pretty sure the parent's favorite state of arousal is when the kids are tired, when they're trying to go to sleep, for instance. When their eyelids are shutting and they don't want it to, or their body's relaxing, they're breathing a little bit slower because the sleepiness is taking over their body. And that's something that the kids are adjusting to as well. They're probably wondering, why am I tired? What's going on? Why am I wanting to go to sleep? Because they've been so active. Now, as infants, when they're in their younger stage, they do a lot of sleeping. And there is a difference between regular sleep and irregular sleep. In regular sleep, you'll see a lot of heavy breathing or rapid eye movement. It could be because of a dream or something's going on in their sleep. So that's something that you also want to be very aware of and looking for to make sure that your kid is sleeping soundly and nothing's going on. So if you do see, you know, some heavy breathing, some sweating, or some rapid eye movement, that could be something that we want to look into. Now I kind of want to focus on more of the stages throughout infancy. So starting with the first one of 4 months. 4 months, to me, that's like our growing stage. That's when we're kind of getting out of that newborn look and we're putting on a few pounds. We're eating a lot more. We're drinking a lot of milk. Maybe not some, but we're kind of starting to get maybe a little bit into that baby food stage. We're growing out a lot of clothes. We're not fitting in a newborn. We're jumping into that 3 to 6 months clothing. Our hair's becoming a bit more permanent. We're losing that newborn paley look. And we're starting to kind of grow into our own body a little bit more. Now, because our bones are still very weak at this stage, we have to be really careful with how we're holding them, grabbing them, picking them up. Make sure we're not shaking or letting the head fall back. Because our bones are still very weak and not fully developed, that could be seriously dangerous. So we have to look out for how we are handling and holding our infant. 5 to 8 months, there isn't as big of a difference in the weight change as there is in 4 months, because 4 months we're growing. 5 to 8 months, it is a little bit slower. One of this stage is a little bit more important in our motor skills, because at this point we're kind of learning how to use our hands and our fingers more. We're learning how to grasp or open our hands and close our hands. And there's also an important moment where they're kind of learning how to organize those motions or movements. When they learn to grab something, they have to open their hand before closing it. Small things, because again, we're still in that infant stage and we're still quite young, but we are learning how to move our hands more and how to organize those movements at this age. Our 9 to 12 months. Now, at this point, we are about 3 times heavier than our birth weight. But that kind of figures because we are a year at this stage. This is a huge stage for parents when we're trying to get our children to walk. So this is the huge age gap where standing and walking is kind of our focus, where we're like, when are we going to take our first steps? They're standing by themselves. So that's kind of our huge focus, but one that we don't really focus on is it's a new visual perspective for the kids. They're learning how to play a little bit more social games like peekaboo, and understanding that they can't see when their hands are over their eyes, but they can see when they're gone. It's little things like that. They're also getting into that independent stage where they're drinking from their own cups, or they want to start feeding themselves. Not the cleanest, but that's when they start to kind of get that independence, and I want to do it by myself, and things like that is a huge key of what's going on at that point. 13 to 18 months. At this time, we're about 4 times our birth weight, but the growth weight does start to decrease. This is starting to go at a little bit of a slower pace because we're adjusting to our body. So as growing, it's not as rapid as it was when we were 4 months, because we are getting older and our body is kind of starting to pick up with our active moving. We're not just sitting or sleeping, we're moving a bit more, and so our body can adjust to that eating and active balance. At this stage, if we haven't started walking yet, most kids have at this age, but most kids are even kind of escalating into the climbing, kicking balls. It's more of a what can we get into stage. This is when we're just kind of explorers. We're wanting to know what we can do. We're pushing those limits a little bit because we've seen how much we can do. We can walk, we can do this. So what can we get into now? So very, very explorer stage. Also a very mimicking stage where we want to be copycats. We see our parent doing it, our babysitter doing it. So that's what they're getting their actions based off of what they see. For instance, oh, mom picked this up when she comes in the door. Maybe, like, I want to pick this up. So just little things. So very copycat, explorer, getting into whatever we can type of stage through 13 to 18 months. Our last stage is 19 months to 24 months. At this time, we're a good bit different than our birth weight because we're about 4 times that weight, which figures because we're 2 at this stage. This is when we're kind of entering our toddler stage. this state, the growth weight continues to taper off. It kind of varies because we are doing so many physical things. This is a huge, to me, creative stage. It's a very, we're kind of doing things a little bit more on our own. We're making our own blocks and we're building our own things. We're drawing our own figures. So it's a very creative type stage to where we are taking a little bit more freedom with what we do. And as far as physical activity, this stage we're kind of jumping, throwing balls, maybe starting to get on a tricycle, things like that, climbing stairs by ourselves. So a little bit more of the intense physical activity, but also very, very creative stage. So a little bit more freedom with our artsy side. So those are the basic stages of infancy, your 4 to 24 months, because after that, that's when we're kind of entering the toddler stage. I focused more on the stages because to me that shows us what we should be looking for in each stage. What's going on when our infant's 4 months to what's going on when they're 24 months. What should we be looking for, pursuing, or watching out for, things like that. So to me, infancy is very based off of stages and the basics of just focusing on those stages. So thank you very much.